Welcome to Wealth Distilled, where we squeeze out the fluff and distill complex financial books into pure 100% proof strategies.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into In This Economy by Kyla Scanlon, the internet's favorite economist.
Yeah.
And we are calling it what it is.
What's that?
The antidote to economic gaslighting. We are finally going to validate that nagging feeling you have that the numbers just, they don't match your reality.
And that feeling of disconnect is so real. I mean, you look around at the sheer stunning amount of progress we've made in medicine and tech.
Right. Engineering.
We're building incredible things, curing diseases, talking to anyone across the world instantly. We are better at almost everything.
But then you turn your attention to the economy, the thing that underpins all of it. And suddenly it feels like we're just, stuck.
Totally stuck.
We have all these sophisticated models, better data than ever, but are we fundamentally any better at predicting a recession than we were 50 years ago?
I mean, when a crisis hits like 2008 or 2020, it feels like all the theories just poof, go out the window.
They do. And on a personal level, are people better at managing their money than their grandparents were?
For the average person, I think the sources are pretty clear. The answer is a big flashing no. We feel this silent depression, even when the headlines are telling us everything is great.
Exactly. That is the gaslighting. The data says GDP is up, unemployment is at a record low, the market's hitting highs.
But I'm watching my rent eat half my paycheck, and a box of cereal costs $7.
Right. The official data completely contradicts your lived experience. And that's what Scanlon gets at. She offers this philosophical reset.
She sort of takes the big, scary monster of macroeconomics and just boils it down to something
human.
Wellness.
Precisely. She argues the economy isn't some machine with fixed rules. It's really just a bunch of peopling around.
And peopling around. I like that.
It's the study of change. How money changes hands, and more importantly, how policy affects our ability to afford the basics: food, a place to live, and finding work that feels, meaningful.
I really appreciate that reframing. It takes the power away from the old guys in suits and puts it back on us, on our decisions, our collective behavior.
That's the idea.
So the mission here for this deep dive is to connect those dots, to stop feeling gaslit and start understanding why our wallets feel so thin when the national balance sheet looks so fat.
That's the goal. And that starts with understanding the whole atmosphere we've been living in. So let's dive into section 1, decoding the disconnect.
Which is all about her signature concept.
The vibe session.
The vibe session. It is maybe the most Gen Z term ever applied to macroeconomics, but wow, is it accurate?
It really is. A vibe session is a period where the traditional hard economic data, trade, industrial output, that top-line unemployment number, it might look okay.
Even good.
Even good, yeah. But the collective feeling, the vibes, are in sharp, undeniable decline. People feel like we're in a recession, even if the official scorekeepers haven't called it yet.
This term, it just validates the emotional reality of the last few years. But how much power do these feelings actually have? Are the vibes really the economy? Or are they just a symptom of it?
Scanlon's argument is that they are the economy. Our collective feelings, what economists call consumer sentiment, they hold a profound amount of power.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. Our sentiment dictates how much we borrow, how much we save, how confident we are when we ask for a raise.
And crucially, how much we spend.
Exactly. That spending, or the lack of it, is the engine. If everyone feels broke and decides to stop going out to eat or buying new clothes, that hits the entire service industry.
Which hits retail, which then hits supply chains.
Right. That collective anxiety moves the needle on everything, from the price of gas to what companies are reporting in their earnings.
That's a huge feedback loop. If I see a headline that says my 401k is down 15%, even if I have a job, I'm probably going to put off buying a new car.
And that one decision, multiplied by millions of people, is what grinds growth to a halt.
Okay, so that brings us to the core of the disconnect. Why is the data saying one thing and our feelings are saying another?
So Scanlon models this as the uncertainty cake.
The uncertainty cake.
Our economic uncertainty is baked from 3 layers. You have expectations, which is how we think things will be.
Okay, the future.
Then you have theory, how things are supposed to be according to the old textbooks.
The rules.
And then there's reality, how things actually are right now on the ground.
And when those 3 layers, expectations, theory, and reality don't line up.
The vibes get weird. Very weird. The conflict makes the official data feel completely meaningless.
And there's a psychological reason for that, right?
Yes, it's partly evolutionary. Our brains are hardwired to process the negative first. It's a survival mechanism.
Right. Look out for the tiger in the grass.
Exactly. So when a rosy GDP headline comes out saying the national economy grew by 3%, that abstract number is instantly canceled out by the very real, very concrete pain of your rent going up 40% in 4 years.
The sting of the rent hike is immediate. The benefit of GDP growth is, I don't know, somewhere out there. Maybe.
It's theoretical, so the data isn't just outdated, it's actually measuring the wrong things.
We're measuring what's easy to count, like the total value of stuff produced, instead of capturing things like human well-being or financial stability.
That's the critique, precisely. GDP is a lagging indicator, and the gap between economic theory, what the textbooks say a company should do, and what a modern massive corporation actually does is huge.
The textbooks assume perfect competition, which just doesn't exist.
Not in energy, not in finance, not in big tech. So this leads to policy based on, like, what already happenedism.
Right, which creates these rigid, outdated rules that don't fit what we actually need right now.
And we saw this play out so tragically with the housing crisis. Scanlon uses the example of Edge Hill in Nashville.
What happened there?
It was a historically black neighborhood, but local policy, specifically these really inflexible low-density zoning laws, made it impossible to build more affordable multifamily homes when demand just exploded.
So the demand was there, but the rule said you can't build the solution.
You can't. The result was massive displacement. The black population in Edge Hill dropped from 86% in 2000 to just 14% by 2020.
Wow.
People were just priced out because the policy refused to evolve. It's a perfect example of how that rigidity in the economic kingdom, as she calls it, creates profound human instability.
And that instability, seeing that structural failure, that makes people pull back.
It does. The uncertainty cake leads directly to that self-fulfilling prophecy of negative vibes.
The most dangerous feedback loop seems to be about inflation.
Absolutely. Inflation expectations.
Yeah.
If everyone expects prices to keep rising forever, that's a really bad vibe. We change our behavior.
You ask for a raise to get ahead of it.
Or businesses raise their prices preemptively because they think their own costs are about to go up. That anxiety is what fuels actual real price increases.
So if the Fed is looking at last month's data to decide what to do next month, but we're all living 3 months in the future based on fear.
They're always playing catch up. They're fighting the last war. The policy just misses the mark.
Okay, let's pivot to that main pain point. The thing that has driven all these bad vibes. Inflation. Let's tackle the permanent price hike we are all dealing with.
This is so critical, and it's the source of so much anger. It's what we call the inflation illusion. When you see a news anchor say inflation is coming down, you feel this visceral confusion.
I feel it constantly. They say inflation is at 3%, but I look at my grocery cart and those prices are still 30% higher than they were a few years ago. What is going on?
The essential lesson here is the toothpaste tube analogy.
The toothpaste tube.
Yeah. Inflation coming down just means prices are rising slower than they were before.
Slower, not going down.
It does not mean prices are going back to 2019 levels. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's out. You can't put it back in.
That is a very bleak but very necessary realization. The price reset is permanent.
It is, unless there's a massive collapse in demand. So what matters in the data is the rate of change. Rapidly rising prices are bad, obviously. They destroy your purchasing power.
Right.
But we have to remember that rapidly falling prices, deflation, are also really, really bad.
Explain that for me, because cheaper milk sounds pretty good right now.
It sounds great for you individually, but for the whole economy, it signals demand is crashing. If you expect a car to be cheaper next month, you'll wait to buy it.
Okay, I see.
When everyone stops buying things, company revenues collapse, which leads to mass layoffs, and you get this vicious cycle of falling prices and job losses.
The dreaded deflationary spiral.
Exactly. That's why central banks aim for what they call a Goldilocks zone, usually around 2% inflation, just enough to keep the engine humming.
So we are stuck with these higher prices from the pandemic. Let's break down the anatomy of that price shock. You mentioned the inflation pizza.
Yeah, it's a great way to see how inflation touches every single input. Take the dough. The price of flour went up 12.1% between June 2022 and 2023.
And that wasn't just because more people were making pizza, right?
No, it was this complex mix of global events. The war in Ukraine disrupting wheat supplies, plus climate change causing droughts that wrecked harvests in other places.
So global geopolitics and climate change are directly connected to my Friday night dinner bill.
Directly.
Yeah.
But we also have to talk about the corporate side. We hear the term greedflation all the time. How much of this is real cost and how much is just price gouging?
Yeah, what's the deal there?
This is where Scanlon brings in the idea of excuseflation, which was coined by Tracy Alloway.
Excuseflation, I like it.
It's what happens when industries are dominated by just a few big players. It lets them hike prices whenever they have a convenient excuse.
Like a global pandemic, a war, a supply chain mess.
Perfect cover. They use it to increase their profit margins, and they're definitely not passing those gains down to their employees through higher wages.
So they see the uncertainty as an opportunity, a chance to raise prices and just blame it on everything else, even if their own costs didn't go up that much.
Exactly. And we see undeniable proof of this, especially with gas prices. It's a phenomenon known as rockets and feathers.
That visual is perfect. Explain the mechanics.
Okay, so it describes how quickly price changes get to you, the consumer. When the wholesale price of crude oil goes up, the price you pay at the pump shoots up almost instantly.
Like a rocket, we all see that happen within a day.
Right. But the asymmetry is on the way down. When crude oil prices fall, the price at the pump comes down much, much more slowly,
Like a gracefully falling feather.
taking its sweet time to hit the ground. And research from the Fed and others confirms this over and over. The decrease is always smaller and slower than the increase was.
Wow. So we're forced to absorb the full instant pain of cost increases, but we're deliberately denied the full savings when costs fall.
That's it.
That confirms like the deepest suspicion of every single consumer. The system is designed to maximize our pain and minimize our benefit.
That is the structural takeaway. You're always catching the downside of volatility no matter which way the underlying price is going.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little. If corporations were only hiking prices because they could, why didn't they do it before 2021? Doesn't the fact that they waited mean there was some real pressure that broke the dam?
That's a really sharp point, and it gets at the complexity. It wasn't just greed. The supply shocks were real, they were massive. The stimulus did increase demand.
Okay.
But the key insight, and we'll get to this with the price spiral, is that once that balance was broken, once we all just sort of accepted higher prices because of scarcity, companies were incentivized to keep those markups way higher for way longer than their actual costs justified.
So the crisis created the opening.
And their market power let them exploit that opening for years.
That makes perfect sense. And nothing has made that feeling of permanent price pain more real than the cost of housing. We have to dive into that. The structural breakdown of the housing trap.
If you want to understand the economy right now, you have to understand housing. There's a famous economist, Edward Leamer, who argued that housing is the most important sector in our economic recessions.
Why is that?
Because residential investment is a huge part of GDP. But unlike, say, a company building a factory, it's completely tied to consumer confidence. It's a consumer cycle, first and foremost.
And the numbers that define this crisis are just, they're staggering.
Historically, a house used to cost about 3 to 3.5 times what a median family earned in a year. Pretty stable.
Right.
Today, that number is 4.5 times the median income nationally. And in big cities, it's way, way worse. It has fundamentally put homeownership out of reach for huge numbers of millennials and Gen Z.
And then on top of that came the mortgage rate shock. The Fed's fight against inflation just turbocharged the whole crisis.
You have to remember how fast and how extreme that swing was. In 2021, you could get a 30-year fixed mortgage for around 2.5%.
An insane once-in-a-lifetime rate.
Then the Fed starts its aggressive hikes, and by late 2023, those rates briefly went over 8%.
Just a massive, massive swing.
And it happened while home prices were already at record highs from the pandemic boom. It created this unprecedented affordability disaster.
Let's break down the financial violence of that. What did it actually do to a monthly budget?
Okay, let's compare a buyer in 2020 to one in 2022. In 2020, you buy an average new home for about $405,000 with a 2.87% rate. Your monthly payment, just principal and interest, is around $1,343.
Okay, manageable for a lot of people.
Now, fast forward to 2022. That same average new home now costs $547,000, and your interest rate is about 6%.
That's the double whammy, rising prices and rising rates.
Brutal. Brutal is the word. It resulted in a massive 96% increase in the average monthly payment.
96%.
Yeah, that payment jumped from $1,343 to $2,628. And that's before taxes and insurance, which have also soared.
Oh my God.
This move effectively locked an estimated 18 million people out of the housing market, just like that.
18 million people just sideline. And if they're locked out of buying, they have to live somewhere.
Which immediately pours gasoline on the fire of the rental market. And that's where the lock-in effect becomes so damaging.
What is the lock-in effect?
We already had a massive housing shortage before all this, about 3.8 million homes short nationally, a deficit that doubled in the last decade.
And because we just stopped building enough houses after 2008.
Right. Now, combine that shortage with the rate shock.
Yeah.
Think about anyone who got a mortgage between 2020 and 2022 at 3 or 4%.
They're holding a golden ticket.
A golden ticket. Selling your home means trading that low payment for a new mortgage at 7 or 8%.
Correct.
The financial incentive to just stay put is overwhelming.
They are locked in. They're not going to move unless they absolutely have to.
Which means the supply of existing homes for sale just dries up completely, making the shortage even worse for the people who are trying to buy now.
And those 18 million people who are locked out are now competing for rentals.
Which drives up rental prices and just makes the whole shelter crisis worse for everyone. The policy that was supposed to cool inflation actually made housing affordability worse by freezing the market.
And the sources point out this is all made worse by two deeper structural issues.
Yes. First, the zoning problem we talked about. Rigid low-density zoning makes it illegal to build the affordable multifamily homes we desperately need.
And artificial scarcity.
And second, you can't ignore the financialization of housing. Big private equity firms are treating single-family homes like a financial asset class. They bought more than 1 in 10 homes sold in the last decade.
Pushing prices up and taking homes off the market for regular families.
It's all part of a system that is actively prioritizing the home as an investment vehicle over the home as a human necessity.
And that ties right back to the entity that started this whole rate shock in the first place, the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
We have to understand the mechanism behind the pain.
Right. We know the economy is people, but the tool the Fed uses money is, it's pretty weird and abstract.
It's mostly just zeros and ones in a computer.
It's a social construct. It only works because we all agree to trust it. And that abstraction is hardest to understand when you get to the bond market.
Okay, so companies and governments issue bonds to borrow money. When I buy a bond, I'm just lending them money for a set interest payment, the coupon.
Correct. And the core, often confusing concept is the inverse correlation. When the Fed raises interest rates, the price of existing bonds goes down.
Okay, here's where the gaslighting shifts from feeling it in my gut to feeling it in my brain. I know this happens, but the why is hard to visualize, especially just listening. Why does my old 3% bond suddenly become less valuable just because the Fed did something?
That's a fantastic point, and it's why so many people just tune out. Let's try to make it really clear. Imagine you bought a $1,000 CD from a bank that pays you a fixed 3% a year.
Okay, so I get $30 a year. That's my existing bond.
Right. Now, the Fed raises rates, and all the new CDs the bank is selling today are paying 5%. Your 3% CD hasn't changed. It still pays $30 a year. But if you try to sell your old one on the open market, nobody's going to pay you the full $1,000 for it.
Because why would they? They could just go get a brand new one that pays 5%.
Exactly. To make your old 3% CD attractive to a buyer, you have to lower the price of it. You have to sell it for, say, $950 until the effective return for the new buyer matches that 5% market rate.
Got it. So the price has to drop to make the yield competitive. That's the inverse correlation.
That's it. And that explains why institutions that were holding tons of old low-rate bonds, like a lot of regional banks were, got into so much trouble when rates spiked so fast.
That makes the mechanics so much clearer. It's all about competitive yield. But trying to grasp the whole machine, the Fed, the yield curve, how that dictates my mortgage, it still feels like a mysterious black box.
It is, but this abstract stuff about the Fed and interest rates, like the yield curve, it's actually super simple visually.
Yeah.
Kyla has these hilarious hand-drawn comics in the book that explain the Fed and interest rates better than any textbook.
That sounds way better than a textbook.
I can't describe the drawings justice on a deep dive. You really need the physical book to see the diagrams. It turns boring economics into a meme.
That's a great strategy, because what we really need to understand is the Fed's main goal when they use all this financial power, their dual mandate.
The Fed's impossible balancing act, price stability controlling inflation, and maximum employment.
And those two goals are often in direct conflict, right?
Especially now. The whole idea of fighting inflation is to raise rates, which is meant to slow down consumer demand, which in turn is meant to cool off the labor market and slow down wage growth.
So it targets the one thing we all rely on to live, our jobs and our wages.
Yes, the Fed is actively trying to cool off the only part of the economy that has recently started to favor the average worker, giving them a tiny bit more leverage.
That is deeply disconcerting. They're aiming for a soft landing, but the main tool they use requires hurting workers.
It's a high-wire act with huge human consequences. And that takes us perfectly into the labor market and worker power. Let's look at that disconnect again, that silent depression feeling, even when the data says we're at maximum employment.
Right. The official unemployment rate, the U3 number, was near a record low of 3.4% in early 2023. That number looks amazing.
But as Scanlon points out, that number misses the whole story. It misses two key groups. First, discouraged workers. People who've given up looking for a job so they're not even counted anymore.
And the underemployed?
Exactly. The doctor working as a barista, the engineer in a part-time retail job. They're technically employed, but they are struggling.
And that data gap is what fuels that whole nobody wants to work anymore narrative.
Which the data just completely refutes. The employment rate for prime working age people is back to pre-pandemic levels. People absolutely want to work.
They just don't want to work for $7 an hour.
Not for insufficient pay, especially when companies are posting record profits. Workers are demanding pay that reflects the actual high cost of living.
And the McKinsey data backs this up. The main reason people leave jobs isn't laziness, it's that there's no room for career advancement. People want to grow.
Which leads us back to the inflation debate. We need to move away from the old idea of a wage price spiral, where workers demanding more money is what drives inflation.
Okay.
Scanlon highlights a concept from former Fed Vice Chair Lael Brainerd.
Yep.
The price
price spiral. Okay, what's the mechanism there? If it's not workers, what is it?
It's driven primarily by corporate markups. Companies are hiking their prices by more than their own input costs went up. They're using the inflationary environment as cover, that excuseflation, to boost their profit margins to highs we haven't seen in decades.
This is a direct challenge to the Fed's whole story. If corporate pricing is the main driver, why did the Fed spend 2 years hiking rates to cool the labor market?
That is the core conflict. That's why we feel gaslit. The Fed's tools are blunt. They're designed to hit demand and labor. They're not designed to regulate corporate pricing or break up monopolies.
So they hit the labor market because that's the nail they have a hammer for.
Even if labor isn't the primary cause of the fire.
So what happened to real wages during all this?
Real wages, so that's wages adjusted for inflation, they've basically stagnated for most people. The bottom 50% of earners actually saw their real wealth decrease by 4% during the pandemic era because of inflation, while the wealthiest 1% saw their wealth go up by over 35%.
That just completely refutes the narrative of greedy workers driving inflation.
It really does. But there is a silver lining in all this recent chaos. Workers finally gained some real power.
How did we see that happen?
We saw it in the reservation wage. That's the lowest wage a worker will accept for a new job. And it soared. In March 2023, the reservation wage hit over $75,000.
Wow.
That's a huge jump. It shows that workers were feeling empowered to hold out and demand what they were actually worth.
It's proof of that labor market reset. The layoffs actually helped people find jobs at companies that would value them more.
It was a necessary correction. Scanlon uses this beautiful analogy from a writer named C.J. Hauser about studying whooping cranes. If you want to save a species, you don't just stare at the bird.
You look at the things it relies on to live. Its food, its water, its habitat.
Exactly. So instead of just staring at the job, we have to look at what the job relies on to sustain a human life. Wages, benefits, safety, and support systems like childcare.
And the Fed's policy inadvertently tries to weaken the very things that support the labor market.
The focus has to shift from constraining workers to enabling abundance.
That brings us perfectly to the end. We've diagnosed the pain, but the book isn't all doom and gloom. Let's talk about building a way out. The abundance agenda.
The core idea here is to acknowledge how severe the problems are, housing, healthcare, all of it, but to shift our focus to pragmatic structural solutions. We need an abundance agenda.
What does that look like?
It means focusing on productive government spending to build the physical and social infrastructure that people actually need to thrive.
So if we apply that abundance agenda to the housing trap, what's the structural change?
The fundamental shift is we have to stop viewing homes only as speculative assets. We have to prioritize their main purpose, which is to be a place to live.
Because right now, the system is unsustainable. Home price appreciation accounts for 86% of homeowner wealth.
Which means most of those gains are just luck and policy design, not anything you actually did to the house. That system needs to be dismantled.
So the number one action point is just build more homes.
Build more homes.
Uh,
Especially high-density housing, where people need to live. And that means changing the rules. It means rezoning.
Is there proof that works?
Yes. Scanlon points to the Mount Laurel Township ruling in New Jersey. It's a landmark case that required towns to provide their fair share of affordable housing. And follow-up studies showed it did not lower property values or increase crime, which are the usual arguments against it.
So we just need the political courage to do it. And what about the labor market? How do we build abundance there?
We have to invest in social infrastructure. And the absolute starting point is childcare. Childcare has to be treated as a public good.
Like a fire department or a library.
Exactly. The private market can't solve it. It's a classic market failure.
Why not?
Because the costs are way too high for families, but the wages for the workers are devastatingly low. The average childcare worker makes less than $30,000 a year.
It's a broken model.
A completely broken model. We all benefit when children are safe and when parents can fully participate in the workforce. So it has to be a collective responsibility.
Just like we all benefit from safe roads, so we pool our money to build them.
Precisely. And beyond childcare, we have to face our demographic challenge, which is an aging population. And that means strategic immigration reform.
We need more people to build the abundance.
Yes, we need policies like extending H-1B visas or state-sponsored programs to bring in workers who can help grow the economy.
And finally, fixing the wealth issue, making sure the workers who produce the abundance actually get a piece of it.
That's how you get inclusive capitalism. You encourage worker ownership through things like employee stock option plans or ESOPs.
So workers hold actual stock in the company.
A direct, tangible stake. They're working to build their own wealth, not just extracting value for some distant shareholder. It's a powerful, market-driven way to build a more equitable economy.
So the way out isn't about waiting for the Fed to save us or trying to game the system. It's about solving basic human needs. Housing, childcare, dignified work.
We have to engage with the system with a capital S and demand that policy reflects our actual needs, not some outdated theory that prioritizes abstract numbers over human well-being.
This has completely validated that feeling of disconnect, and it's given us the language, vibe session, rocket and feathers, price spiral, to actually talk about it.
The disconnect is real, and it is not your fault. It is the result of outdated data, corporate pricing power, and policies that treat necessities like housing and childcare as tools for wealth extraction, not as assets to be invested in.
So let's end with an action item for everyone listening. Think about your vibe indicator. What is the one item that makes you mad every single time you buy it?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is it the $7 cereal? The $18 cocktail? Let us know. Vent in the comments. That's the distilled wisdom for today.
If you want more high-proof financial insights, subscribe to Wealth Distilled.
Catch you in the next deep dive.